Perry on the Bible and Bhagavad Gita. This week's reading is God present even there where there is ignorance? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. Following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The Gospel of St. John, chapter 1, makes a reference to the divine light that is obscure to the rational faculty, but that enlightens our higher nature. The light that shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. Reason recoils from this statement with innumerable questions. What is this darkness? Is it conscious that it should comprehend anything? What sort of light would be capable of shining in darkness without transforming at least that part of the darkness in which it shines into light? Does this light shine only at night? And if so, why only then? The solution is that to divine sight, even daylight seems darkness. The sun itself, like the moon which shines only by reflected light from the sun, is but a kind of reflection of the cosmic light, which, being immaterial, is invisible to the eyes, but which is the great source of all material reality. In Autobiography of a Yogi, Paramahansa Yogananda describes his youthful visit to Ram Gopal Mazumdar, the sleepless saint, who lived in the vision of that hidden light. Around midnight, Yogananda wrote, Ram Gopal fell into silence, and I lay down on my blankets. Closing my eyes, I saw flashes of lightning. The vast space within me was a chamber of molten light. I opened my eyes and observed the same dazzling radiance. The room became a part of the infinite vault which I beheld with infinite vision. Why don't you go to sleep? Sir, how can I sleep in the presence of lightning, blazing whether my eyes are shut or open? You are blessed to have this experience. The spiritual radiations are not easily seen. The saint added a few words of affection. This is the light that shineth in darkness. It has been described variously in the great scriptures. In the Bhagavad Gita, the 11th chapter, the devotee Arjuna is given an experience of the infinite state and exclaims in awe, if there should rise suddenly within the skies sunburst of 1,000 suns, flooding earth with beams undreamed of, then might be that Holy One's majesty and radiance dreamed of. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Oh, oh, oh.
Good morning. I kind of like this cold weather myself, but I know not everybody does, because it usually means bright blue skies. So, but I think we're probably going to get to an end of that so that we can go back to normal, whatever. So I want to start with some fun humor, just to get things off here for a good start, because this is kind of an interesting topic, like of course they always are, and it's kind of the third week of having the same readings. We're finally getting to that line that people kind of go, what is this light shining in the darkness? And the darkness comprehended it not. So we get to explore that today. And this really pertains to the topic. So I'm going to be reading you some information that we put on signs. And these signs were in foreign countries. And so, of course, they were written by non-English speaking people. And this is true. And these are what they're, you will understand what they're trying to say, but this is what these signs actually said. And this is from a sign in a Paris hotel elevator. It said, please leave your values at the hotel desk. And then the next one is from a Bangkok dry cleaners. It says, drop your trousers here for best results. And then in a Hong Kong dentist office, it says, teeth extracted by the latest Methodists. In a Rome laundry, the sign says, ladies, leave your clothes here and spend your afternoon having a good time. In a lobby in Bucharest, the sign says, the lift is being fixed tomorrow, and so during that time we regret that you will be unbearable. And on a sign outside a Hong Kong tailor shop, ladies may have a fit upstairs. Anyway, so what does this have to do with the topic? Well, we're talking a lot about, it says, where God is present, even where there's ignorance. So we've got some ignorance going on here, and it's not necessarily their fault, is it? These are non-English speaking people. English is a language that's, it takes a little bit of a challenge to get the nuances of it. And so they just have some ignorance of how to put the words together. Not their fault, but that's kind of where they are. So what we're talking about here today is not evil against good, which a lot of people look at the light against the darkness as evil and good, and that's certainly one way you can look at it. But we're going to go a little deeper in the fact that what we're really looking at here is the fact that it's really ignorance. Darkness and light, we're talking about God's consciousness. We're talking about the divine consciousness. And the divine consciousness is light. It's that highest vibration that there is. It's subtle. It's something that it's there, but it's kind of like the radio waves and the TV waves and stuff that are inside this building right now. Unless we have the right equipment to tune into it, to us it's not there. But God's light is here. It's right here, right now. But we aren't equipped to tune into it, most of us anyway, at this point. And so that means the light for us is more like darkness. Our consciousness is not refined enough so that we can actually perceive those higher vibrations of the light. So we can call it ignorance. Yogananda said there is no sin, there's only ignorance. People just don't know. They haven't got to that point. And so we too, most of the time, live kind of in the darkness of this ego consciousness. And we can't comprehend the light, the God consciousness, that divine consciousness, which is always here, which is within us, which is everything there is. For there is nothing else but God's consciousness. And it has been stepped down to make this material reality, that vibration, that energy of God's consciousness, that has been kind of frozen into this matter. And so we coming out into being part of this matter, we're part of that more frozen consciousness. So we're not able to perceive the more subtleties of the divine light. It's called just trying to understand. And God knows this, and there's always that call within us that's trying to help us to lift our energy, to refine our energy, so that we begin to rise up out of this darker energy that we're in right now. Because our way is to go back home to God. That is the purpose of our life. That's why we're here. We're not here to necessarily, as Yogananda said, an easy life is not necessarily a victorious life. Because an easy life usually means we can just kind of slide by and, everything goes well. Isn't that kind of what we all in the back of our minds want? We just want to be happy and we want everything to go well. We don't want any problems, anything to come up to rock the boat. But isn't it true? Is there anyone here that hasn't had their boat rocked? Probably not once or twice, probably many times. And so why? Why is it when we just want to be happy? Because that is what God is. God is pure happiness. It's God's pure joy. So God's that unconditional love, everything that we seek in this material world. But our consciousness needs to be lifted up into that God consciousness. God will give us little hints of His consciousness, but we have to do the work. That's the purpose of life, is for us to allow ourselves to dive deep into this consciousness that's pulling us towards Him, which is why no matter what we do in this physical plane, it usually doesn't quite do it, does it? Usually there's something missing. There's something that doesn't quite make us happy. And so we have to keep going forward. We have to keep making those changes. I know for me, an example that I have is, I always thought that I couldn't be happy unless I lived out in the country, because I was raised in the country. We couldn't even see our nearest neighbors, and I played in the woods and on the mountains, and just, all by myself sometimes, or with my sister, and we would just take off for the day with a little lunch in our pocket, and we'd just wander around. And, I just found such joy in that kind of life. And so when I became an adult, guess where I tried to find my place to live? I always lived out in the country somewhere. Maple Valley was my home once. Issaquah back in the 1970s when it was a little village. I almost bought a house out in Preston. And finally ended up in Snohomish. I thought I needed to have that support of the nature, because it was so important to me. But when I found Ananda and we got to the point of having a community, we started a community, I began to realize that I really needed to experience something different. Just because I like the country, but again, it wasn't totally fulfilling. Nothing in this earth plane is. And we sometimes just have to make those changes, whether we think they're going to work or not. We just dive into it. And so I decided that I would live in the city. Linwood, to me, was the city. And it was a very much of a challenge for me to give up, but to me was the most important thing, next to the spiritual path, which certainly took precedence. And so I followed that inner guidance because I knew that's what I needed to do. And living in Linwood in the community has been a wonderful step to get rid of a lot of those old attachments that I had to the way it should be, the way it is, because it's not true. It's not true. There are other ways, better ways for me to seek that joy, that happiness, which is there within me. It isn't in the woods necessarily. It isn't in the city. It isn't even in our community. But the community and what we offer through this particular path is what has helped guide me forward so that I could grow. Otherwise, it turns out to be more of a, we don't really go sideways, so it turns out we're more of a up and down all the time. I couldn't really plow ahead. And so, for each of us, we have to sometimes just let go of the old and allow ourselves to try something new that feels right to us. Something where we feel like we're being guided. We feel like this is the right thing to do. If it's not the right thing to do, you'll be guided and you'll know it's not the right thing to do. What you don't want to do is just be stagnant. You don't want to find excuses why to ignore that little voice that's trying to help you. What you want to do is take some action to the best of your ability. And if it's not right, sometimes you'll have to make some changes. But that's okay. At least you put out some energy towards that goal. And we'll be growing towards it. Consciousness is kind of a continuum. Yogananda said that God is asleep in the rocks and the minerals. Most people don't think of rocks and minerals having consciousness, but everything is consciousness. But it's asleep. It's not very aware at that level. And God's consciousness dreams in the plants. It's beginning to wake up, isn't it? And in the animals, it is waking up. We know animals have some consciousness. They have feelings. They have some intelligence. Many, many things like that. So God's consciousness waking up. They're becoming aware. And then in the human body, we are awake. But we're not fully awake. For it is only in the great saints that we are truly awake. We are moving towards that awakeness in God, which is what the final goal is. So what does it mean we're awake? Well, it means that we have consciousness. But most of our consciousness is settled in our own bodies, in this physical self. And a fun story I like to tell, Chandi is one of our longtime teachers at our Living Wisdom schools. And she told me about this time she works with the kids, not only learning their ABCs. She's a preschool teacher. Sometimes she'll do pre-K or kindergarten, but she teaches those basics to them. But a big part of it is just learning how to live. And these kids, are young, little preschoolers. And so there was a time when they were all sitting down to lunch, and one of the little girls said, "I don't want to sit with you. You're not my friend. She's my friend." And that was a good teachable moment, and she was getting ready to do her teachable moment thing, and she said, another little girl stood up and very deliberately and said, "But you're my friend, and you're my friend, and you're my friend." And she went all around the table, pointing to every little child, every boy, every girl sitting around that table, telling them that they're all her friend. And so this consciousness, you can see there's a gradation there. There's a gradation in terms of awareness. There's nothing wrong with what that little girl said, except that it was hurtful. It wasn't a higher way of relating. But children are like that, aren't they? They tend to just see themselves as the center of the universe. And so as we grow up, but that's what maturity is to help us to see that they're the realities of other people, see the realities other than our own, and to see how we affect other people, and how can we grow into that higher awareness, because God is pure love, pure joy. God is peace. And that's what we seek so much inside of us. That's what we're headed towards. And so as we grow into that awareness, we begin to want to shed this me, myself, and I-ness, which comes with little children. And we begin to open up to other people's realities. Because for God, we're all equal. We're all one in that divine presence. And so we have to lift up our consciousness day by day, practicing higher consciousness. We might not even feel it sometimes, but we know about it, practice it. Every moment is an opportunity for us to grow in our consciousness. This is a sentence I want to see what you react to. It's Yogananda says, "Whatever comes to us in life comes from God." Now, that means everything. Now, of course, we know some of the things that come to us are good, that we define as good, and yet there are things that happen to us and our friends. There are tragedies, of course, that happen. There are challenges that we feel are impossible to meet. We wonder why we got stuck with the way we are, with our personality, or with a particular physical ailment that we might have. There's so much, and yet if you can look at it and know that wherever you are right now, whatever has happened to you, and some of you have had bigger happenings too than others, more than likely, but it is exactly what you needed for whatever reason. God knows. And if we can only accept that and try to learn from that, that is why we're here. We're not here to live and just be happy and have fun all the time and all that stuff. We can have fun by working. We can have fun by serving. It's our attitude. So whatever comes to you, and what these awful things that do come sometimes, these challenging things that come, what's the purpose of them? Well, it's kind of serve as a prod, isn't it? Kind of help you along. Say, oh, well, I guess I'm getting too complacent, or time for a change, or because we have to be warriors on the spiritual path. Spiritual path is not for people who don't have any fear. You really have to dig in, and you have to want to put out that energy. And Master said warriors. It takes a warrior spirit on the spiritual path, and all these things that happen to us help us to lift our energy to become spiritual warriors. There's a fun recollection that I got. I have a book on John Muir, of course, the wonderful naturalist that we talk about. And John Muir also kept a journal, and he would, write little notations. But he also drew little pictures. He liked to kind of draw little sketches and stuff. And there was a trip that he took with his wife. We don't hear much about her, but this was a trip and they went to Yosemite, and they camped and hiked and that kind of stuff. And this little picture had a caption too, and it showed his wife hiking up this hill, and there was John Muir behind the wife, and he had his long walking stick poking in her back. And the caption under it simply said, "Here we are climbing the hill." And so, kind of get a picture there. And I must admit, I brought that picture to mind more than once when I'm facing things that, perhaps I don't want to put out the energy and do it right then, or, something better might be better, but I know I should. And I kind of get this picture that there's a Divine Mother who's got this stick in my back, and she's prodding me forward, come on, you gotta do it, this is something you have to go through. Because Divine Mother's with us all the time. She's right there. We just are so busy in our mind and busy in what we're doing that we don't always remember. As a matter of fact, we don't usually remember. But that's what we need to be doing, is remembering. I'm reading a book now on Padre Pio, and what was so significant that I was thinking about, Padre Pio was a saint. He's been canonized, but obviously in his life, he was very much a saint. And he was a Catholic stigmatist. And anyway, what he did, he had rosaries, and I don't know much about Catholicism, but he had a rosary, and all the time, when he wasn't actively engaged serving in some way, he was praying the rosary, just continually praying the rosary. And, in other words, he was keeping that God consciousness always present in his consciousness, always thinking about God in that respect. And there's some way that we can increase that in our own life. We have busy lives, we have responsibilities. All these things have to happen because they're part of your process of growing towards God. But if you can help yourself by just trying to keep that consciousness of God always with you, it's like you need to stir this longing in your heart, just wanting it. I don't know how else to say it. Just realizing that that's what you want more than anything else. Just keeping that consciousness, so keeping that God awareness, whatever it takes, some kind of a mantra, perhaps. I guess that's why I like walking in the woods or up in the mountains so much, walking alone, because it's so easy to keep that God consciousness. I look at a flower and you see God, and then you see him in the rock, and then you see him in the sky, and everything is there. So somehow bring that into your life in other ways, whatever works for you. The good news is that even though the spiritual path sometimes seems like this battle, and we talk about it as a battle, and we don't mean to get you discouraged, but there is a little work to be done. But the good news is that, as you start to do this, and as you do it, it actually gets easier. The hill is pretty steep at the beginning. There's an incline that you got to hit, and you got to put out that energy, and then you start to climb it. And that incline, it takes a lot. But as you get up that incline more and more, that help, that divine help, you begin to feel that divine help. It's always there, but you begin to tune into it. As your heart begins to long more and more for it, that longing is responded to. The divine is there, ready to pull you up whenever you're there, reaching up for it, with sincerity in your heart. It has to be sincere, because God knows your heart. He knows what you're really thinking. But with that sincerity in your heart, that the path actually becomes joyful, because you're doing it with the divine, and you're feeling that presence just helping you along every step of the way. That divine presence, it's there. Just tune into it, ask for it, long for it. And that will draw the divine to you. The divine responds to your heart. It doesn't respond to the brain, saying platitudes. It responds to that yearning in your heart. And so whatever it takes to begin to make that a part of your life, that's what we're talking about. I want to end with a little story about St. Augustine. St. Augustine was a monk back in the, probably more of an ascetic, but he was back in the 4th century. And he started off his life as a very wealthy man. He was born into a wealthy family, and he really liked what the wealth brought him. And he knew that he liked it, but he also was a very high soul, and so he was very aware that, he really wanted God. And so he spent more than 3 decades of his life bouncing back and forth between the worldly life that he really liked, he really enjoyed having the wine and the women and a little bit of fun and things like that, the material world, but he felt so badly about it because he knew it wasn't what God wanted, and he wanted God. And so he bounced back and forth, just a horrible torture to his soul, living like this back and forth for 3 decades, until finally it says he got so desperate that he would just roll around, ripping out his hair, ripping on his clothes, just calling to God to help him to change, to take him away so that he would be able to go deeper in God. And obviously at that point, before that point, he didn't have the sincerity. He would pray for it, but he wasn't really sincere. He was still enjoying the worldly life. But when he got to that point, finally, when he was so totally sincere, then grace enveloped him. He said it was just grace, divine grace, and instantly that other part of him was gone. Divine grace comes when you are sincere, when you really have that longing in your heart. It will help lift you. And any little experiences that can come to you, perhaps in your meditation you'll feel some joy, or perhaps maybe feel some of that light in your forehead. You'll see that light. Whatever it is that, sometimes maybe it's just that sense of stillness. Everything becomes so peaceful. Those are like little rays of that divine light. It's those rays that are helping you to move forward. Grab onto them, because they don't happen all the time, of course. But if you can grab onto them and know that those are just little hints of what's there, and that's what you're moving forward, that's going to help you always, always in your life. Last Sunday service, we had the joy of singing this wonderful song Susan and I did called Keep Calling Him. One of them, a very deeply spiritual song. I was just thinking that that's really what I'm trying to say right now, is don't give up. Just, even if the lines go, remain persistent, undepressed through dark and seeming silence. If in the midst of life, disease, death, you play the dancer and keep calling him. Keep calling him. You will receive his answer. And so that's what our goal to do is here in this life. Just keep calling God, and you will receive his answer. Let's meditate on that.
Open my inner eye. Open my inner eye, O fountain of light, that I may behold thee in the dance of the myriad-hued atoms. Burst open the doors of space, that I may see thee behind the swirling mists of material illusion. Behind thy walls of brilliant cosmic rays, thou art hiding. Open every portal in nature, that I may see thee everywhere. I now give you an opportunity to make an offering.